In the cosy North Welsh town of Mold with about 10,000 inhabitants lived Catherine Gowing, a veterinarian from Ireland. For Catherine, who loved travel and nature, this place reminded her of her homeland. Here she shared an apartment with her longtime friend, Jane Doyle. Catherine was born in the year 1975 in a large farming family. Her father devoted his life to agriculture, and her mother taught at a school. During the summer holidays, the whole family worked on the farm. From a young age, Catherine helped with the work and showed special interest in animals. The dream of becoming a veterinarian arose on her father's farm, where she joyfully cared for the animals. The surrounding nature enchanted the young woman so much that country life became her calling. Therefore, the move to Mold was a natural choice. Here, she felt at home. In her studies, Catherine showed exceptional abilities. After graduating from St. Brandon's School, she continued her education at the community college in Bere. Even among the most successful students, she stood out through her academic achievements. In the final exams in natural sciences, she showed brilliant results and placed third nationwide. Everyone predicted a successful future for her. Catherine was distinguished by exceptional kindness and showed care for both animals and people. After school, she received an invitation to the University of Budapest in Hungary, which enabled her to realize her long-time dream, to begin veterinary medicine studies. At the university, her circle of acquaintances expanded considerably. Particularly close became the friendship with Jane Doyle, who also came from Ireland. They were inseparable, studied together, relaxed, and attended student events. They were connected by their sincere love for their future profession. After graduation, Jane found a position in an animal clinic in Mold in northern Wales. She integrated quickly into the team, and when a new position became available, she recommended Catherine Gowing. Catherine won people over through her optimism and professionalism. Her abilities were impressive. She could handle any animal, even the most restless ones. Her natural psychological talent helped her communicate easily with animal owners. Thanks to these qualities, she quickly became one of the most sought-after specialists in the city. The friends grew to love the area, although they initially lived in a transitional apartment provided by the clinic. Not entirely satisfied with the conditions, they actively searched for new accommodation. To reduce costs, they rented a shared house with their friend in New Brighton, only 5 minutes from their workplace. The year 2012 became a time of success and stability for Catherine Gowing and her friend. Catherine had already been working for a year and a half in an animal clinic, where she had earned the respect of her colleagues. Attractive and charming, with her soft Irish accent, she attracted the attention of many men. But her career as a veterinarian was more important to her than romantic relationships, which mostly remained fleeting. In contrast to Catherine, her friend Jane was in a serious relationship. In October, Jane planned to visit her family and asked Catherine to represent her at work. She was considering returning to Ireland to care for her elderly parents. The helpful Catherine agreed, hoping for a favor during her future family visit. She could not imagine that this simple request would become the beginning of disturbing events. On Friday, the 12th of October 2012, Catherine finished her workday at 8 o'clock and went to the store. The cameras recorded her arrival at 8:06. She wore blue jeans, a brown zip jacket, and a light brown shoulder bag. After about half an hour in the store, she left it with an Asda bag and a pizza box. After that, she was seen by no one. Since Catherine was alone in the house, her absence was not immediately noticed. On Sunday, the 14th of October, she was supposed to meet a colleague for lunch, but she did not respond, did not appear for the meeting, and did not answer calls. The acquaintance with whom a meeting was planned became worried about Catherine's absence. He had known her for a long time, and such behavior was atypical for her. The situation changed when Jane returned from Ireland on Sunday evening and did not find her friend. The car was also not parked in front of the house. Strange was the unlocked front door. When searching the house, Jane found no clues about Catherine's whereabouts. She did not respond to calls. In all rooms, there was an unusually strong smell of cleaning products. The friend's personal belongings were also missing. Jane suspected that Catherine had spontaneously driven home for the weekend, as she had planned to do later anyway. Exhausted from the long drive and thinking about her morning shift, Jane went to sleep, hoping her friend would appear in the morning or she would meet her at the animal clinic. The next morning, nothing had changed. No signs of Catherine's return, silence in response to calls and messages. The friend also did not appear at the clinic. The management was not annoyed, but concerned. They knew that the employee had not been reachable since Friday after work. During this time, some received only strange, short messages that were atypical for Catherine. The content of these messages remained unknown. The colleagues decided to involve the police. After unsuccessful attempts to reach her friend, Jane went directly to the police station after work. She reported the disappearance and told about the last 24 hours, which helped to quickly exclude her from the circle of suspects. Additionally, she gave information about Catherine's car, which had disappeared together with the owner. The vehicle could become important evidence in this case. The law enforcement officers began the search immediately. The investigation began with conversations with the missing person's relatives. Everyone emphasized that she was very responsible and always informed about all changes to her plans. Precisely for this reason, her acquaintances were very worried. After evaluating the surveillance cameras, the investigators could follow the woman's path from the animal clinic to the shop. After she left the parking lot, her further route could no longer be determined. Catherine's parents in Ireland were quickly informed about the incident. They shared that their daughter had not visited them and had not contacted them for several days. Her sister and her husband immediately flew to Wales to help with the search. They appealed to the public through the press, but until the 16th of October, no important tips came in. During the thorough search of the apartment, the investigators found unusual traces. Fresh signs of the presence of a strange man in the bedroom and a strange object by the bed. This indicated a possible visitor, but her friend claimed that Catherine had no close relationships. Additionally, according to her friend, Catherine was not inclined to fleeting encounters. Also disturbing was the fact that the front door was open when Jane returned. All found evidence was sent for examination. Still on the evening of the 14th of October, while the worried Jane tried to reach her friend, she contacted Clive Sharp, her acquaintance. After a recent argument, he wanted to win her attention, but Jane had no sense for it, which saddened him. Their relationship lasted several months. Clive worked as a sales consultant and lived about 150 kilometers from the friend's house. Despite the distance, he often visited them and spent time with Jane. They met through a dating app. Clive knew Catherine, but no communication developed between them. He was often at their home. Catherine tried to avoid his presence. Normally, she left the house when he visited her friend. In conversations with relatives, Catherine mentioned several times her concern about this man. From them, the law enforcement officers learned about the difficult situation. This information aroused their attention and they began to examine Clive's personality more closely. The day after Catherine's disappearance, law enforcement arrested Clive Sharp. However, due to lack of solid evidence, no charges could be brought. They received permission to search his car and took samples for DNA analysis. In parallel, the investigators gathered information about the main participant of the case. Checking police databases revealed disturbing facts. Behind Clive's outward charm hid a problematic past, a total of 14 years behind bars. In the last 3 decades, his case was connected with inappropriate behavior toward women. His first problems with the law occurred in his youth when he sent indecent messages and showed aggression. Soon he was sentenced to 3 years in prison for a serious offense. After his release, it seemed as if he had changed. Clive started a family and became a father. For several years, Clive was not found in criminal reports. Unfortunately, this calm proved to be temporary. His private life was not happy. His wife Gillian struggled with an addiction to forbidden substances, which led to a sad end. Possibly these events influenced his behavior. In 1994, Clive landed behind bars again after inappropriate behavior toward his friend's wife. The sentence was 3 years. Shortly after his release, he received a harsher punishment, 8 years for an incident with a stabbing weapon. However, after 5 years, he was released early. In 2003, he again tried to start a family, but by 2011, the marriage failed. Later, he got into a conflict with his partner's friend, Catherine Gowing, who later disappeared. This coincidence did not seem random to the investigators, and Clive was taken into custody. In custody, he participated in a special psychological assistance program. There, he shared disturbing fantasies that caused serious concerns among the specialists. The reports noted his pathological tendency towards certain actions. In custody, Clive denied any involvement in the story with Catherine and claimed to have been visiting relatives. Surprisingly, his daughter and stepfather confirmed this statement. The relatives confirmed the meeting with him on the weekend and noticed his usual calm behavior. However, this did not exclude his possible involvement in the incident. Time-wise, he could have first met with Catherine and then visited the family. Law enforcement carefully analyzed every detail to find inconsistencies in the suspect's story. Soon it turned out that Clive Sharp was lying. At this time, the results of the laboratory examination of the traces found in Catherine's bedroom had arrived. The analysis showed a complete match with the samples taken from the suspect. This proved his presence in the missing woman's house. Considering the fact that Catherine avoided this man and avoided any contact with him, the version of a voluntary meeting aroused serious doubts. The search for Catherine continued, although hope dwindled with each day, especially after Clive's disturbing fantasies became known. 2 days after this discovery, a young couple walking near the abandoned Pinfolane quarry, 5 kilometers from Catherine's house, stumbled upon her burned-out car. On the 18th of October, an important call came into the police station. Despite severe fire damage, the investigators quickly determined that the found car wreck belonged to the missing woman. The news about the possible incident with the local veterinarian spread quickly in the area. No one was found in the car, nor were there any other clues about what had happened. After this discovery, hardly any hope remained for a good outcome. Meanwhile, Clive Sharp continued to deny his involvement in Catherine's disappearance. On the 19th of October, the prosecutor's office brought charges against him after gathering sufficient evidence. Despite the lack of important physical evidence, preparation for a long court proceeding began. The prosecution understood all the difficulties and carefully gathered all possible evidence against the accused. The search work continued. Areas near Catherine's house and the location where her car was found were examined. Police officers, volunteers, helicopters and search dogs were deployed in the search. Divers examined the local waters. On the 7th of January 2013, while Clive Sharp was still denying his guilt, disturbing discoveries were made in the lake at the quarry, not far from the burned-out car. Several bags with evidence were discovered in the water. 1 day later, more physical evidence was found 3 kilometers from this location. The examination confirmed their belonging to the missing Catherine Gowing. Despite continued searching in the water, nothing further was found. The discovered evidence was sent to Ireland, where Catherine's family lived. In Quinite, County Offaly, Ireland, more than 300 people came to support the relatives at the memorial service. The court proceeding began on the 14th of January 2013. On his lawyer's advice, the accused surprisingly confessed at the beginning of the trial, which significantly accelerated the process. This spared the family long court proceedings. However, this decision was not marked by remorse. The accused had no other choice due to the many pieces of evidence gathered, including DNA traces and materials found in his car. Despite the confession, Clive Sharp refused to tell all the details of the incident. The prosecution presented their version of the events of the 12th of October 2012. In their view, Sharp broke into Catherine's house when she was alone. He knew about his acquaintance's departure and chose a moment when no one would disturb. It is suspected that the accused had long shown interest in Catherine, who ignored him. Clive observed the house and waited until the light went out. After that, he broke in. According to the investigator's opinion, the perpetrator spent several hours in the house. The next morning, he went shopping. The cameras filmed him in the same store where Catherine was last seen. There he bought household items, including garbage bags, cleaning supplies, and other objects. In the neighboring hardware store, he bought tools. After his return, Sharp carefully covered the traces of his stay. He eliminated all evidence so thoroughly that the experts could not find traces of what had happened. After that, he disposed of Catherine's personal belongings and her car. The perpetrator doused everything with fuel and caused a fire to cover traces. The investigations revealed that the next day he sold his old car and bought a new one. With exactly this car, he bragged to Jane the following Monday when she tried to find out something about her friend's fate. The sold vehicle could be found and examined. Materials were discovered in it that resembled those at the crime scene, as well as biological traces from Clive. The data from his phone confirmed his presence at the lake and near the location where the burned car was found. All these discoveries strengthened the prosecution's position. The accused strictly refused to comment on these facts. During the course of the investigations, another disturbing circumstance came to light. It turned out that Clive Sharp initially appeared at another woman's house around 22 o'clock that evening. She testified and reported about their earlier relationship. According to her words, the man behaved aggressively, which is why she broke off contact. That evening, he broke into her apartment and showed conspicuous behavior, but left the apartment after her request. Presumably, he then went to Catherine's house. Around midnight, his car was captured by cameras in the hotel parking lot across the street. The recording showed how after waiting briefly, he abruptly left the car and went to the house, probably after waiting until the light in the windows went out. After about an hour, Clive returned to the car, where he spent about another hour and a half. Around 3 o'clock at night, he returned again to Catherine's house. For him, this was a chance to realize what another acquaintance had not allowed. He knew that no one was in the house, and thanks to Jane's key, he could easily break in. Despite the confession of guilt, it was not possible to obtain additional information from the defendant. During the trial, he sat there with his head lowered and avoided looking at the prosecutor and Catherine's relatives. Clive was found guilty. The prosecution demanded 42 years imprisonment, but because of the confession, the sentence was reduced to 37 years. After the trial, Catherine's sister Emma spoke with the media. She told how the disappearance of this wonderful woman had shattered all acquaintances. Catherine had dedicated herself to her work and helped others. In the Catholic Church of Buckley, a memorial for Catherine was erected, which was financed by her colleagues from the animal clinic where she had worked for 1.5 years. What had happened had a strong influence on Jane. She blamed herself for the acquaintance with Clive, that she had let him into her life and given him the key. He seemed decent and charming and never showed bad tendencies. She knew nothing of his criminal past. Jane could not cope with the events, gave up her work at the clinic and moved to the northwest of England to begin a new life. The perpetrator is still serving his sentence. His mother could not bear the truth about her son and died shortly thereafter. Clive's daughter broke off contact with her father. This case became one of the most controversial and convoluted in the history of the law enforcement agencies of the state of Iowa. Initially, the incident was classified as self-defense, but the deeper the investigators dug, the more questions arose. The investigation resembled a labyrinth, where behind each turn, new, unexpected perspectives opened up. The investigators encountered numerous potential participants, who, however, all seemed to have vanished into thin air and left no substantial traces. Each new promising lead ultimately led to a dead end. Time passed without clarity being gained. On the contrary, With the years came doubts about the basic substance of the case. The suspicion arose that the foundation of the investigations might be built on the sand of unreliable statements and false assumptions. At the end of the 90s, the Roberts family moved from bustling Chicago to the small town of Early in Iowa. Tracy and Michael, a young married couple, quickly integrated into the local community. She was a Native American. He came from Australia. For both, it was not the first marriage. Tracy had a son from an earlier relationship. Michael was considered a true computer genius and developed his IT business from home. His head bubbled with ideas that he wanted to realize. Tracy, on the other hand, was the soul of every gathering, a cheerful, sociable housewife who loved sports and always looked perfect. Their love story began on the internet and developed into a passionate romance. Not 3 weeks after their first meeting, they said their vows. Soon after, they became parents of a son and a daughter. From the outside, perfect harmony seemed to reign in the family. Many admired Michael's determination. Especially their neighbor Mona, a real estate agent, was impressed by this. They successfully completed several profitable deals, and Mona was ready for anything to continue the cooperation. The sympathy seemed to be mutual. One day, Mona confided to Michael the problems of her 20-year-old son, Dustin. The young man was very withdrawn and could not find his place in life, constantly changing his jobs. Michael showed sympathy and offered to take the young man under his wing and develop his potential. Mona agreed joyfully. He began to introduce Dustin to the intricacies of his business, took him on vacation and even to church, supported him in every conceivable way. In the eyes of fellow humans, Michael was considered a kind, pleasant, and helpful person. His wife Tracy was also valued by everyone as lovable and sociable. In the quiet town of Early lived an ordinary family: Tracy, her husband, and 3 children. While her husband was frequently absent due to work, the 35-year-old Tracy took care of house and children. No one would have thought that their quiet life could suddenly change. The evening of the 13th of December 2001 began as usual. Tracy prepared dinner and warmed the food in the kitchen. On the first floor, she ran a bath for her 1-year-old daughter. The 2 older boys, 3 and 11 years old, watched television in Bert's room, the oldest son's. Suddenly, Tracy's piercing scream echoed through the house. The worried Bert hurried to the source of the sound and saw how his mother tried to enter his room. But someone abruptly pulled her back into the hallway. Tracy just managed to hand the toddler to her son before the door closed. Behind the door, a struggle and muffled cries for help could be heard. Then a brief silence occurred, which was interrupted by loud noises. Bert, frightened by the events, did not know what to do. At 19 o'clock, the 11-year-old boy called emergency 911. He reported that intruders had broken into their house and were acting against his mother. The dispatcher recognized the seriousness of the situation and immediately dispatched police and emergency services to the scene. After a few minutes, after more than 30 kilometers of travel, the rescue forces arrived at the house. They found the crying children and the frightened Tracy in front of the house. The woman pointed to the stairs and shouted that someone was upstairs. However, the paramedics could not enter the house according to regulations until the police had ensured safety. It turned out that Tracy had managed to defend herself against the uninvited guests. As a result of the incident, one of them was harmed, while the other fled. While the police examined the house, the paramedics began to care for Tracy and tried to calm her and the children after the incident. The arriving law enforcement officers went to the first floor where they found an unconscious young man. Otherwise, no one was in the house. Tracy had severe breathing difficulties, which is why the paramedics immediately took her to the nearest medical facility. The situation appeared like an unexpected incident, but more difficulties were to follow. The family was completely confused. There were many questions that no one could answer. The investigators began investigations to unravel this complicated tangle of events. The incident shook the quiet town of Early, where only 500 people lived and where nothing comparable had ever happened before. During questioning, the 11-year-old son of the victim reported that he had seen someone block his mother's way into the children's room and forcibly pull her back. The boy, initially frozen, decided to defend himself and the other children in case his mother could not manage it. He took a baseball bat and prepared for self-defense. When the noise subsided, he heard only his mother's heavy breathing. After some time, the child heard the voices of two men from outside. They began knocking on the door, and the frightened boy started screaming and used all the crude words he knew to scare away the uninvited guests. Behind the door, trampling and male screams could be heard. Then more than 10 sharp sounds rang out, after which the mother opened the door. When she learned of the incident, family friend Mona hurried to the scene searching for her 20-year-old son Dustin, who was friends with the family. His car stood in the driveway, but upon the woman's arrival, the entire property, including her son's car, was cordoned off. She was not allowed to enter the Roberts house. The woman asked the present officers about her son's whereabouts and received sad news. The young man, whose mentor was the head of the family, lay motionless next to the bedroom on the first floor. This happened during the confrontation due to the unlawful actions of the young man. The police gave Mona no additional information. They did not allow her to say goodbye to her son and did not go into detail about the specifics of the incident. The woman remained in complete ignorance about the circumstances of the incident. 20 kilometers from her home, Tracy woke up in a medical facility and could finally breathe normally again. The victim shared the details of that evening with the law representatives. The mother of 3 children told that she was preparing a bath upstairs when she heard a noise on the ground floor. Assuming her husband had returned early from his business trip, she went to check but discovered 2 strangers. When she saw that they were coming up the stairs, Tracy still managed to run to her oldest son's room and hand him her youngest daughter. She tried to hide there but could not manage it. She was dragged into the hallway. One of the intruders tried to cut off her air. Tracy lost consciousness, and when she came to, she heard Bert's calls behind the door. She recognized her chance to act and rushed to the gun cabinet next to the bed in the master bedroom. The pursuers caught up with her, but as if by miracle, the woman still managed to open the safe, take out the self-defense item, and use it. Tracy could not see the intruders because of the smoke after using the weapon, but heard how someone fled from the house. As a result, one of the young men lay unconscious. The other had disappeared. When she heard the frightened voices of the children, the woman went to her son's room. When she opened the door, she just barely dodged her son's baseball bat, who was trying to defend himself. Fortunately, the children were fine. When the smoke in the bedroom had cleared, Tracy saw 20-year-old Dustin lying on the floor who was conscious. According to her statements, the young man began to get up, and she, in a state of shock and armed, demanded that he stay in place. She screamed for him not to move, but Dustin, the son of her friend Mona, did not obey. He began to get up and move toward her. Out of fear for her safety and the children's lives, she used the self-defense object, after which Dustin no longer moved. No traces of the second intruder were found. On this day, Dustin appeared unexpectedly at the Roberts house. When he learned that Tracy's husband was not there, he did not leave the porch for a long time and showed strange behavior. Tracy had to firmly ask him to leave. Later, Tracy described the second participant of the incident, a tall man of about 30 years with dark hair, whose face she could not recognize. That evening, her husband Michael was on a business trip in Minneapolis. The situation seemed inexplicable. Why was Dustin, to whom Michael had granted support, in their house together with an unknown person? Tracy was very disturbed, as she knew that the second participant of the incident had not yet been found. She was afraid to return home and be alone. The police could not find the second man for a long time, as they only had an imprecise description from Tracy. The investigators examined Dustin's environment to find out who could have been with him in the Roberts house. Many admired Tracy's actions and considered her a heroine. Her story attracted nationwide attention. Tracy gave several interviews. In front of the camera, she and Michael held hands, and she said calmly, "I did what I had to do to protect my family." The public applauded her. Many considered her actions justified. Tracy proved courage by protecting not only herself but also the children. She was compared to a mother bear protecting her cubs. Tracy tried to maintain calm and take care of her family. She hoped that law enforcement would soon find answers to all questions and restore the sense of security in their house. However, the investigators were accustomed to questioning all statements. They began to carefully analyze all circumstances of the incident, as the story of the woman who had to defend herself did not seem entirely convincing to them. The deeper the officers delved into the case files, the more questions arose. Despite the broad public support for Tracy, what had happened was a real shock for some people. The mother of the young man who was at the center of these events was going through the hardest time of her life. What had happened literally broke her heart. For her, all the details of the incident that Tracy reported seemed senseless. The mother constantly thought about that fateful evening and tried to understand what had really happened to her son. At this time, the young man's mother, Mona, gave interviews to journalists. She was confused by the incident and could not believe what had happened. Dustin was not aggressive. On the contrary, he was a good boy, said Mona. He never showed hostility toward others and had no problems with the law. There were no signs that he could behave aggressively toward the Roberts family. However, Dustin had difficulties with social adaptation and even visited a psychologist together with his mother. It was difficult for him to find friends at school. His peers often made fun of him and did not invite him to parties. Mona took her son to various specialists, but they all made different diagnoses and could not say anything concrete about whether this could lead to uncontrolled behavior, because the teenager could not cope with his emotions. Tracy confessed to the investigators that she had always feared Dustin. In his presence, she felt uncomfortable and insecure, even in her husband's presence. She tried to avoid meetings with the young man and never agreed to leave him alone with the children. The woman was convinced that he could harm them. These accusations shocked Mona. She had no idea that her friend had such difficulties dealing with her son. It seemed to her that everything looked quite different. The investigators came to the conclusion after examining the crime scene that there were no obvious reasons for Dustin's aggressive behavior, unless it was planned material enrichment. Many valuables were kept in the Roberts house, which is why Tracy suspected that the uninvited guests wanted to enrich themselves by taking cash, or, for example, one of Michael's collector equipment. However, the actions of the unknown persons did not resemble an attempt to appropriate valuables. They did not even touch the money and jewelry that lay openly around, and did not try to take Tracy's jewelry from her when she lost consciousness. Instead, they went directly after her, as if the use of violence was their actual goal. In doing so, they did not attempt to commit unlawful acts. The investigation soon led the police to a possible motive for this incident. Tracy and her husband reported a recently occurred unpleasant incident. Shortly before the break-in into their house, the woman had experienced inappropriate behavior from her dentist during treatment under anesthesia. She regained consciousness at the most inopportune moment. The doctor tried to convince Tracy to keep everything secret. He promised to contact specialists and pay her $150,000 in compensation. Tracy told her husband what had happened, who insisted on filing a complaint with law enforcement. In 2 days, she was to testify in court with serious accusations against the dentist. It was suspected that he could have been the second unknown person who broke into the house to prevent Tracy from testifying. However, the investigation revealed that the dentist had no connection to Dustin and had a solid alibi. He was at work. Then Tracy remembered another person who might wish her harm. It was her first husband, John Pittman. They met at Northwestern University in Chicago, where both studied medicine. John was an upper-level student who was doing an internship at a Chicago clinic, while 19-year-old Tracy was just beginning her studies to become an X-ray assistant. He had a dominant character, but Tracy, who had grown up with a demanding father, considered such behavior normal. They married and moved to Denver, where their son was born. Initially, Tracy accepted her husband's need for control as given, but over time, the relationship deteriorated. In 1992, she decided to end this unhealthy relationship. After the separation, the question of custody for 3-year-old Bert arose. The boy shared disturbing information about his father's behavior with his mother. Tense court proceedings about custody began. Although there was no direct evidence of inappropriate behavior by the father, Tracy insisted on her version. During this time, the son lived with his mother. The custody dispute dragged on and was still ongoing at the time of the incident. Therefore, John Pittman appeared as a likely candidate for the role of accomplice or instigator of the incident. Even little Bert suspected his father's involvement in what had happened. Law enforcement contacted their colleagues in Virginia, where John lived, to check his whereabouts on the day of the incident. It turned out that he had a secure alibi. He was working at a clinic at that time. John denied any involvement in the incident, and no evidence was found against him. At this time, John was a respected plastic surgeon with an impeccable reputation. His acquaintances did not believe that he could harm his son or his former wife, in whom he had long lost interest. Nevertheless, the investigators continued to consider him as a possible participant in the case. Time passed, but the investigation stagnated. Tracy felt increasingly uncomfortable, as she feared that the second participant of the incident might return. During this time, the investigators' attention turned to Tracy's second husband, Michael. Upon closer examination, it became apparent that their marriage had long since lost its former warmth. Some suspected that Michael might have tried to end the relationship in an unusual way. This version had its basis. Tracy's eldest son, Bert, shared disturbing information about his stepfather. According to his words, the man was very strict and often punished the boy harshly for the smallest offenses. Surprisingly, Tracy seemed not to notice this behavior of her husband and did not stand up for the children. Possibly she had been accustomed to such treatment since childhood and saw nothing unusual in it. The investigators' suspicion was reinforced by Michael's behavior in the hospital when he visited his relatives. This made her suspicious. The impression arose that the man was genuinely surprised to see her in good health. Possibly this did not correspond to his expectations. Michael, however, had an irrefutable alibi. He was on a business trip in another city, which was confirmed by surveillance camera recordings. The man was subjected to a lie detector test, but the results were ambiguous, and he was obviously concealing something. The investigators suspected that the probability of his involvement in organizing the incident was quite high. After a year of meticulous work, the investigators could not find irrefutable evidence. However, the behavior of the affected woman's husband raised questions. He concealed the results of the lie detector test from his wife and showed no compassion. This awakened new moments of suspicion in Tracy, especially when she learned about her husband's failed test. The woman became extremely suspicious and suspected that her husband and Dustin had conspired against her to get sole custody of the children. Tracy shared her fears with the sheriff and mentioned Michael's words in his sleep about a conspiracy. She was convinced that both were working together. The investigators began to examine Michael more closely and discovered that his IT company was on the verge of collapse, and he was in debt. The couple had high insurance policies, which is why the assumption arose that the husband might have resorted to extreme measures to solve his problems financially. Additionally, he was friends with Dustin and could theoretically have persuaded the young man to help. However, these were only assumptions without solid evidence for Michael's involvement. Meanwhile, the relationship of the Roberts couple deteriorated. In the year 2004, 3 years after the incident, their marriage was divorced on the man's initiative, but the law enforcement agencies still had no basis for arresting the alleged principal. After the divorce, Tracy moved with the children to Omaha, changed her job, and even her name. She hid out of fear of a repetition of the events. Mona, Dustin's mother, also moved with her daughters to another city. Mona was emotionally exhausted but swore to restore her son's reputation. She constantly thought about what had happened and about the reasons for Dustin's appearance in Tracy's house. The mother refused to believe that her son could harm the people who were his mentors. The young man valued the relationship with this family greatly due to his socialization problems and was grateful to Michael for his support. Mona even planned to file a lawsuit to hold Tracy accountable and find out the truth about that night. Her lawyers began their own investigations and noticed inconsistencies in the affected person's statements. In one version, Tracy claimed she had recognized Dustin immediately. In another, she had only established his identity later. She also described her position at the time of the crime execution differently. Due to these inconsistencies, the lawyers suspected that Tracy's story might not be truthful. On Christmas Eve, Dustin's mother went shopping for the holidays. She called home to find out if her son had gotten up, who had an important appointment. The daughter informed her that Dustin had already left. Mona was pleased and thought this was a good sign. He had awakened on his own and attended to his tasks. Later, however, Mona's nephew informed her about an incident in the house of her acquaintances, Michael and Tracy. Mona drove there immediately and feared the worst for the couple, but could not imagine that something had happened to her son. She remembered that Tracy had invited Dustin herself the day before to help her with something. Mona suspected that Tracy had lured him to her in this way with evil intentions. The mother was convinced that Tracy was hiding something. But no one listened to Mona until after 7 years the investigative team changed. The case was reopened, and the officers doubted Tracy's version according to which she had heroically saved her children. In the house, there were no signs of forced entry or attempted theft of valuables. How could 2 people have entered? Everything indicated that the incident occurred in the immediate vicinity, and no evidence of a second perpetrator was found. The new investigators decided to speak with Tracy's first husband. It turned out that he did not at all resemble the monster that Tracy had described him as. The man told them that she was the one with the anger outbursts. Once she even pointed a firearm at him to intimidate him. In the end, she damaged the ceiling, and the husband had to call the police. Tracy, however, explained it as an accident and escaped the consequences. According to John's statement, it was Tracy, not he, who behaved aggressively and was unfaithful in the marriage and wasted his money. His suspicions prompted him to hire a private investigator who confirmed that numerous admirers of Tracy left the house in the husband's absence. Ultimately, the man filed for divorce because he feared for his safety and could no longer tolerate her behavior. He worried about his son, who was growing up in an unhealthy atmosphere, and fought for custody, which made Tracy angry. Despite her attempts to turn the son against the father, she had no evidence of abuse by the ex-husband. She understood that the ex-husband's chances for custody were higher, and possibly this drove her to desperate actions to defame John. The story with the dentist who was accused of inappropriate behavior took an unexpected turn. It turned out that he had actually received unwanted attention from a patient for a long time. The doctor had evidence, video recordings from the surveillance cameras in the practice. Interestingly, when Tracy learned about this, she withdrew her complaint against the dentist on the eve of the incident. Her second husband, Michael, whom she accused of aggressive behavior after the separation, also refuted these claims in conversation with the investigators. He spoke for his part about his wife's infidelity and her difficult character. Michael tolerated the situation for the children's sake, but finally divorced anyway. He admitted to having been a strict father, but denied any accusations of aggression toward his wife and children. According to his words, Tracy incited the children against him. After the divorce, the man moved to California and focused on his business, in which he became successful. The impression arose that the woman had slandered everyone around her by trying to present herself as a victim of the actions of the men in her environment, but reality proved to be different. The investigators doubted the truthfulness of Tracy's narrative about the events of the 13th of December 2001. They had to speak with her personally, But the mother of 3 children had not only moved to another state and changed her data, she constantly changed her contact information. While the officers tried to find the woman, they questioned her close female friends to understand the motives. One of the friends gave important clues. Under pressure from the officers, she told them that she had helped Tracy with house cleaning after the incident. When Tracy showed her the place from which she had allegedly defended herself, what was described seemed physically impossible. It was unclear how an ordinary woman could cope with 2 men in such a situation. The police officers had to re-examine all the evidence. Among it was an old computer that was found in Dustin's car. Tracy considered it the main evidence of attempted material gain, since the technology belonged to her husband. But it was unclear why Dustin had taken precisely this one when there were more valuable and compact things in the house that were easier to take. For example, money and jewelry in visible places. On the front seat of Dustin's car, they found a pink notebook with a crime plan that was allegedly written shortly before the incident. In it, there was talk of an assignment against Tracy Roberts from her first husband, John Pittman. But in the records, there were too many details that the young man could not have known in advance. It seemed as if Dustin had written under dictation or coercion. Dustin's mother did not recognize this notebook. It was pink, more like a woman's notebook, and Dustin did not like this color and would never have bought one. Additionally, he did not keep diaries at all. In the notebook, there were no other records except the plan, as if it had been bought especially for this purpose. The suspicion arose that Tracy might have given the young man this notebook to stage the incident. The investigators reviewed their position on the incident. They came to the conclusion that the young man who was previously considered an aggressor had actually become the victim of deception. He was naive and trusting, which Tracy exploited. At this time, the woman already had problems at her new place of residence in Nebraska. The local authorities suspected her of document forgery and providing false information about herself. This led to the search of her apartment. After a decade, the investigators were able to reconstruct the course of events. On the 27th of July 2011, they arrested the woman who was previously considered a heroine who had protected her children. A key role was played by the statements of Tracy's friend, who helped her with house cleaning. She knew about a notebook with Dustin's alleged confession. The investigators found out that these records had been created under Tracy's dictation. No traces of a struggle were found in the house. The small scratches on Tracy's neck, as it turned out, she could have inflicted on herself. The nature of the injuries on Dustin did not match Tracy's description. The claim that he had tried to get up seemed unbelievable. Such injuries were incompatible with life. The experts concluded after examining the crime scene photos that Tracy defended herself from top to bottom when the young man was already lying on the ground. This contradicted Tracy's version of self-defense. She used the tool when he was already unable to move. Nevertheless, the defense insisted that Tracy was protecting her children. It was a convincing story aimed at the jury. The lawyers claimed that most of the evidence was indirect. The main witness for the defense was to be Bear, the oldest son of the accused. He reported that he had heard male voices behind the door and seen someone dragging his mother. According to the teenager, the perpetrator had also intimidated him. Later, he allegedly saw how the injured young man tried to get up. However, the credibility of these statements was doubtful. According to Tracy's original accounts, the children's room door was closed at that time, and her son could not see that at all. Therefore, the prosecutor assumed that these memories had been implanted by the mother. The prosecutor claimed that the accused had decided to eliminate Dustin in order to blame her spouses, to obtain sole custody of the children and complete control over the finances. In this, they saw the main reason for the incident. According to the prosecution, Tracy forced Dustin under pressure that day to make notes in a notebook, after which the inevitable happened. Subsequently, she left light traces on herself and placed the notebook and computer in his car. Even the medical expert confirmed that with such injuries she could not have lost consciousness, which also raised questions. After lengthy examination of the case files, the jury found Tracy Roberts guilty. The woman was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of early release. At the sentencing, Tracy broke into tears in the courtroom. But no one believed her tears, which did not really exist. The woman was once again acting. These events hit Bert the hardest. He was convinced that his mother had saved the lives of all her children that cold night and was wrongfully imprisoned. He visits and supports her to this day. Tracy's second husband took his children with the permission of the guardianship authorities after a few years and returned to his homeland Australia with his new wife. Tracy continues to insist on her innocence. She is serving her sentence in the Mitchell Valley Women's Prison in the state of Iowa,